Released on August 8, 2017 for PC and PS4, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is the newest IP to be developed by Ninja Theory. Although notably different in tone and gameplay from Ninja Theory's previous releases, such as Heavenly Sword, Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, and 2013's DMC Devil May Cry, it's clear to see that the development team are well versed in combat systems, as it certainly shines through in Hellblade. Just to get it out of the way, this is without a doubt the best looking game I've ever played. Running on PC with the GTX 1080 at 1080p, the game flows without a hitch. I've seen a few sources with similar hardware to mine claiming that, while running at 1440p, some immersion-breaking pop-in of foliage rears its head, but I can't really attest to that or how it runs on the PlayStation. The game's hyper-realistic graphics and next-level motion capture serve to create the most immersive experience I've had with a video game in a long time. And that immersion is on many levels disturbing. For those of you who don't know, Hellblade is a game with a message. It touches on a few very dark aspects of the human experience, some more relatable than others. The more relatable side of the story is based on coping with trauma and loss. The storyline is essentially just a rehashing of Dante's Inferno with a switch of gender and religious ideology. A female Celtic warrior fights through a literal hellscape, in this case the Nordic counterpart of Hell, known as Helheim, in an attempt to save her husband's soul. It's this side of the story that we can relate to. It pulls us in and we can identify with Senua's obsessive quest to prevent a loved one from suffering, even in death. The other commentary that Ninja Theory set out to make is that of playing a protagonist who suffers from psychosis. From the very beginning of the game you start to hear voices. A few at first, but as the game progresses, more and more join the ensemble, often talking over each other in a way that becomes confusing and unnerving, most of all, because apparently it's accurate. Ninja Theory worked with a team of medical experts and individuals who suffer with psychosis to ensure an experience as authentic to the illness as they could produce. With a decent surround sound headset, this becomes pretty terrifying. All of the voices were recorded with the use of a 3D binaural microphone, which is able to recreate the feeling of positioning in a three-dimensional space. It literally took me 20 minutes to figure out how to solve the first puzzle, perhaps due to the fact that the game very rarely explains anything, but in part because all the while, there were voices going around my head telling me that I would never figure it out. As I thankfully do not suffer with psychosis, it's impossible for me to tell you whether or not this experience does the illness any justice, but it was hard-hitting and thought-provoking all the same. The gameplay itself is a mixture of fairly linear exploration, puzzle solving, and sword-based combat against waves of enemies of varying difficulty with a few boss fights to break it up. I played the game on auto difficulty, and nothing really stood out as being particularly challenging. The combat is fluid and responsive enough that there isn't much of a learning curve. The only issue that I have with the combat is that there may be too much of it thrown in without good reason. Otherwise well-crafted areas felt like they had large, flat, open spaces shoehorned in for little more than an excuse to throw another wave of the same 4 enemies your way. Very early on, in the only attempt that is ever really made to explain a game mechanic with writing on the screen, we're told that Hellblade features a permadeath function of sorts, and that if you die too many times, your game save will be deleted. Although I didn't die enough for this to occur, the feeling of threat and dread was persistent throughout every fight sequence. I'm not usually one for puzzle games, as in all honesty I'm not very good at them. This worried me going in, but with just a handful of puzzle types that are all fairly simple, ramping up only slightly towards the end of the game, these didn't stump for long or cause irritation. In fact, the illusion-based gate puzzles may be some of my favourite I've ever come across in gaming. Overall, the game is one that I have to recommend, especially at its price point. The developers have described Hellblade as an indie game with a AAA coating, and claim that the game is too short to warrant a full price tag. I'm all for this, but my playthrough lasted 8.5 hours. The fact that they're only charging £25 for this experience at release is just insane. The game seems to be selling and reviewing far better than the company expected, and without too many spoilers, I have a feeling this isn't the last we've seen of Senua. If you found this review at all helpful and want to see more from me, feel free to subscribe and check out my other videos. Thanks guys.